10,000 people that were here illegally that had criminal backgrounds. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
If you're asking me are you asking me to rely on what the Trump administration has said?
Assume it is true, because I think you're going to debate me on this. They have removed tens of thousands of people across the country that are here illegally, that have committed crimes. They have a criminal background. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I agree with the general premise that we should remove the worst of the worst who are not authorized to be in the United States who commit crimes.
Okay, so if they're here illegally and they've committed burglary, should they be removed? What was that?
Ma'am.
I think you said yes. I just couldn't hear you.
Ma'am, look, I think I answered your question.
You didn't. I'm asking you now.
If you're asking me,
this is a simple question. As
if somebody commits a crime,
if someone burglarizes
commits a crime,
and they're here illegally, should they be deported?
If somebody commits a felony offense, I mean, but it's.
Okay, let me make it simple. If they are drug trafficking and they are in Minnesota and they're here illegally, should they be deported?
Have they been convicted?
Let's assume they've been convicted.
Yeah.
Okay. If they have broken into people's homes or committed theft, or let me go as far as saying if they've committed fraud and they're here illegally, should they be deported?
Have they been convicted?
If they are in the process and they have a background of a criminal conviction for any crime, should they be deported?
People who have been convicted and are not authorized to be in the country should be removed.
Okay, if they've been convicted and they have an application in process or they've claimed asylum, should they be removed?
Don't we need to find,
if they have a criminal conviction for fraud and they're here illegally, or they have a process pending, should they be removed?
If they have a criminal conviction for felony fraud and they're unauthorized to be in the country, they should be removed.
So do you think it would shock the federal government when in January of 2026, you said, and I quote, we're not going to help the Trump administration. We're not going to devote the resources of our state to help the Trump administration. That's not our business. We're not going to help them. We're not going to do their bidding.
I'm glad you asked me.
Hold on. Do you think it would surprise an administration who's trying to go back and rid communities of people here illegally that are committing crimes to have the top law enforcement officer of the state said, we're not going to help them?
So, Senator, here's the thing. The federal government is a government of limited and enumerated powers, among them immigration enforcement.
Do you think you should help remove people here illegally that have committed crimes? Should you help the administration?
We should obey Minnesota and federal law. That's what we should do.
Does it surprise you that you said you think you have 7 counties that have entered into 287G out of 87 counties, 7? Would it surprise you that Florida has every one of our counties signed up to help the administration rid our communities of those that are here legally committing crimes?
It would neither surprise me or not surprise me.
Does it surprise you that
states
you're
are
having
different.
all of these problems in Minnesota because you have a top cop that won't help rid its community of those here illegally committing crimes?
You know what?
It's a tale of 2 states, a tale of 2 attorney generals, in how this is all playing out. It should surprise no one in this country. And in fact, let me go a step further. It should surprise no one in this country that the problems that we have had in your state as a result of a top cop not working with law enforcement to make its community safe and rid people here committing crimes, that you're seeing what has played out. And let me just
say, that's actually wrong. That's actually quite wrong.
You cannot have an attorney general
certainly disagree with that.
Post pictures supporting Antifa with an expectation you are going to have a civilized, stable, safe community that works with federal law enforcement to deport criminals here illegally committing crime. That is a joke. And it is also the reason why you have a crisis in law enforcement ranks. You have such a high vacancy rate in your state because no one that wears a badge and does these dangerous jobs believes that their top cop supports them. And as the wife of a law enforcement officer, I think that is a shame, and your state deserves better.
Senator, I thought we were going to have a real conversation. I'd be happy to have one, but now I know that you don't really want one, so congratulations on your theater.
Time has expired. With that, this concludes our first panel. I'd like to thank our witnesses for participating in today's hearing. We will now transition to our second panel. momentarily.
With a canister on the ground, would you think that's de-escalatory? Was that what
We're
you would
leaving
try-
out what I'm seeing is a subject that's also not compliant. He's not following any guidance. He's fighting back nonstop. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know what's going on in this situation. I know that they're all being interviewed what was going on, and that will be part of the official record. But I can't answer whether that's appropriate or not. It depends on what a reasonable officer saw at that time.
So is that part of training? Do you train
Absolutely not.
officers to beat somebody with a canister?
We
If
don't-
there are only several officers holding someone down, then if you really want to.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask just a process question here? Are the people in those videos not entitled to Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendment protection of due process? It seems to me that if we get to a place in time in America
Prosecution,
where we
yes.
have a video that is the entirety of what is guilt or not guilt, puts us in a very, very
I don't
bad
think
situation.
anybody's assessing.
Well, I
any
think
kind
that's
of
what you're saying.
criminal guilt. No,
You're asking for conclusions.
No, we're asking for conclusions for what is the proper use of force for all agents.
But you're asking specific questions about
Right.
a
And-
video.
And the answers have been generic answers. We haven't got.
As they should be, as they should be, by the way.
And so-
And I just want to point out that these American citizens who are entitled to Fifth and 14th Amendment protections, and for us to make certain that we keep that in mind as we ask these conclusive questions.
They do. For a court of law and for any criminal proceeding, they absolutely deserve that. We're going to move on to a first round of questions, and I'm going to pass mine to Senator Johnson, and I'll reclaim mine later.
Mr. Chairman, first, are the witnesses going to be providing testimony?
They've been taken for the record. They've been taken for the record. They gave the same public testimony yesterday.
Oh, I wanted to hear from them. Okay. So there was a real disconnect in our first panel in terms of Congressman Emmer and the representative from Minnesota State Legislature versus the Attorney General and fellow in charge of prisons in terms of the level that Minnesota was cooperating with ICE and with Customs and Border Patrol. Were you listening to that opening panel?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I'll start with you, Commissioner Scott. What would you agree or disagree with in terms of what was said in that first panel in terms of the cooperation or lack of cooperation? Because according to Attorney General Ellison, they were perfectly cooperating and there shouldn't have been any problems here. And I think that the statement he used is it was because of the unprecedented nature. Let me get the. Well, you just said again. It was because of the scale of the surge that's what caused all the problem versus Minnesota cooperating or not cooperating.
Yeah, that's not accurate at all. I actually met with the Attorney General when I went up with Tom Homan. We initially had conversations. The reason that CBP surged a bunch of resources into Minneapolis is because ICE couldn't go do arrests without being violently assaulted, and they were not getting support from state and local law enforcement.
So talk about the kind of arrest, because we heard from here, and I, quite honestly, I didn't get the complete answer from the fellow from the prisons when he said, as long as there's a judicial order. And I was wondering, does he mean from an Article 3 judge, or is he talking about the administrative law judges that we use for enforcement of ICE? So was that a distinction? Were they only going to honor and they're only going to cooperate with Article 3 judicial orders? Or did they concede the fact that we handle federal immigration law through the administrative law judges?
So I would defer to ICE on what the normal processes were.
Mr. Lyons.
Yes, sir. I can speak to that. It's both, sir, judicial and administrative. They did not cooperate at all. I can give you an example.
Well, please give me multiple examples.
I can give you an example where ICE, enforcement removal operations and Homeland Security investigations, we did execute a criminal warrant for an individual from Ecuador who fled the state of Connecticut that was wanted for the state of Connecticut for a rape of a 14-year-old minor. He did have a murder warrant from Ecuador, and we did not have any cooperation with that. Going back to the surge part, we did have that.
Just describe no cooperation. I mean, so
we had to
walk through here. So you got this warrant on somebody who's convicted of, or I guess convicted of a of a violent crime or just wanted on a violent crime? I mean, be specific. Talk about this instance.
This incident, sir, the subject was wanted from the state of Connecticut, fled the state of Connecticut after a detainer was not honored in the state of Connecticut. He was wanted for rape of a 14-year-old minor.
But he wasn't convicted. They made a big deal about, it's got to be a convicted criminal.
No, sir, it was an actual criminal warrant from the state of Connecticut. And that subject was also wanted on an Interpol warrant because he was wanted for homicide in his home country. And he was also illegal reentry, 8 U.S.C. 1326. So it was
But you understand the point. Again, they were making a big point. It has to be convicted. A.G. Ellison kept saying, well, is the person convicted of the crime?
Well, sir, I think we have to start first, is the person even supposed to be in the country in the first place?
I understand. but so I'm just trying to point out, is that a valid criteria? The Attorney General Ellison was talking about, well, if as long as this person's been convicted of a crime, that's not required, is it?
No, sir.
The person's here illegally. There's a warrant from a different country as well as from the state of Connecticut. So with this individual, what did Minnesota not do? What was requested in Minnesota or Hennepin County or whichever?
So the Minneapolis Police Department and the St. Paul Police Department, they're, by city orders, they don't cooperate with us. So for instance, we asked them to hold a perimeter or hold a street. That's why we need more officer agents. We would have to go ahead and hold down that city block. Unfortunately, obviously, those vehicles do stick out. Obviously, we used, based on the subject's criminal history, we used an armored vehicle. Once that's seen, agitators started coming to the scene. So now while we're trying to effectuate a criminal arrest warrant in an apartment building, small stairwell, fatal funnel, we have to go ahead and hold down the outer perimeter, where if we had the cooperation of a state or local agency to work with us on that fact, we wouldn't have to have that many officers.
Why weren't the state and local officials interested in arresting this individual with the multiple warrants on them? Just because it was an illegal immigrant?
Because it involved an ICE operation, sir.
So any other, if it's an American citizens with that kind of warrant from Connecticut, local police would have been doing this job themselves?
I can't speak for him, but I would assume so, sir. I was a civilian police. I was a cop before ICE, and that's what we did.
So talk about the violence, the threats, the doxing against ICE officers. Because again, that's where I've got a great deal of sympathy for people trying to enforce the law. They've been shot at. They've had their vehicles rammed, rocks thrown at their vehicles, doxed. On Central America, I found out that if you're become a new police chief, you get a DVD from the friendly drug cartels with your children and wife going into school and going to church. It's an explicit threat, hands off, or we're going to do something. Well, there's such a demand for unmasking ICE officers, but they've been doxed. So just talk about the violence, the threats, the doxing that your law enforcement officers are really under.
So, sir, it's day to day. I was the field office director for the state of New England. I covered all of New England. And if you looked at the beginning of the operations, January 20th up until April, ICE officers and agents weren't masked. But it's bad. And I'll just use myself as an example. The week that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there was a tweet that went out. It said, kill Charlie Kirk, there was another individual in that, kill Todd Lyons. That's the stuff that ICE, yesterday after the testimony on Tuesday, I went back to numerous death threats against my family. There was a videotape of my wife walking to work that people actively post. The cartels have actually posted the schematics to my home. ICE agents feel that every day. We actually did an operation with the Secret Service where we identified doxers who put up on telephone poles the home addresses and the schools where ICE officers and agents went to. But yet no one covered that operation. We covered that as a success. And I don't want my officers masked. I would work with this committee and any committee to work with holding individuals accountable that dox ICE agents, because ICE agents don't want to be masked. They're honorable men and women, but the threats against their family are real.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Peters.
So we just watched on the video of previously American citizens that were basically being manhandled and pushed and hit and beaten with canisters. We didn't see on the video, but 95% of them, or 90+% of Americans who have seen that video, also shot. Alex Preddy shot 10 times while laying face down in the back by law enforcement officers. And we also know he was basically just holding a phone, being manhandled and shot 10 times. So I just want to confirm with you, filming federal officers on a public street is not illegal, is it, Mr. Scott, Mr. Lyons?
Correct.
No, sir.
He did not, at least looking at the video, all of us who've watched the video, he did not attempt to harm law enforcement. No appearance of that. Is that correct?
I don't know what happened once he was on the ground, sir.
When he was laying face down with several people
With the
on top
weapon
of
in
him?
his waistband initially, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying I can't jump to that conclusion because I don't know what happened on the ground. That's why there's an investigation still ongoing. Standing up, I would agree with what you just said.
Okay. So when he's on the ground with a bunch of officers on top of him after he's been hit with a canister, he was somehow still possibly harmed to law enforcement, you're saying? It's possible?
That's happened thousands of times, yes. And
Okay. Mr. Lyons, really? You saw him that as a possible threat?
Sir, from the, that wasn't an ICE operation, that was a CBP operation.
I get it, but you're a highly trained professional.
Yes, sir. No, obviously, there's not enough evidence to speak to, but that's the best thing about this is the fact that I can speak for ICE, Office of Professional Responsibility, as well as CBPs, that they're the same, that we have to have a full investigation, and it has to come out.
Okay.
We have to base that training on that.
So you have to have a full investigation. What everybody saw in the video, there might be some extenuating circumstances. We just don't know, but the video is very clear. And yet we had the Trump administration claim that he was attempting to inflict mass casualties. You're going to have to explain how you had that come to that, how the Trump administration came to that conclusion when you can't even come to the conclusion that he may have been resisting when he was laying flat on his back with being beaten. How did they come to the fact that he was going to have those mass casualties? And then, quote, Secretary Noem said he was committing, quote, an act of domestic terrorism. What you saw in the video, is that what you train your officers? Someone laying on the ground, that's an act of domestic terrorism? Commissioner Scott and Acting Lyons, did you provide Secretary Noem with an assessment of what Mr. Petty was engaged in and that he was engaged in domestic terrorism? Is that why she said that? Is because you told her? That was your belief at that time? Even though you need an awful lot of investigation now to know exactly what happened. Are you the ones that told her that?
no, sir.
No, sir.
Did anyone who reports to either of you provide this assessment to Secretary Noem that this was mass casualty, or he was attempting to inflict mass casualties and domestic terrorism? Did someone in your staff tell her that?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
No,
So
sir.
why would Secretary Noem, why would she tell the public that this was an act of domestic terrorism when right in the heat of the moment? How would she possibly come to that kind of conclusion to tell the American public that when they're watching this video?
I can't speculate on what someone else would say or why, sir.
Mr. Lyons?
Sir, I can't speculate to what the Secretary thought at that time, sir.
So it seems to me a really big question, which means that we have to have Secretary Noem here. She deserves it to the American people deserve to have the Secretary, the person who is responsible to, you are responsible to, and all the men and women ICE answer to her. She needs to be before this committee. She ducks coming out in public and talking and hasn't accepted prior invitations to come to this committee. I would hope the chairman would invite her because this is an important question. How could you come to those conclusions, those narratives, before any evidence was there, even after all that's happened since then? You two are telling me you don't have enough evidence, even though it looks so clear on the video. It should have looked really clear to her if she looked at the video, if she had it that close. A lot of this got posted pretty quickly. How she came to those conclusions, I don't expect you to know that. You didn't provide any information to her, which makes me question it even more. If she got no information from you in the chain of command, how would you come up with that kind of narrative if the chain of command wasn't doing it? Acting Director Lyons, we have all seen multiple instances of DHS personnel jumping out of unmarked cars. They will have weapons drawn. They're wearing masks. They don't have clear identification. And this, of course, immediately will escalate an encounter with the public. There's no way around it that's not escalatory when you see that coming at you. Often these masked individuals are only wearing a sign on their vest that just says police. This is the type of vest that can be easily purchased by anyone and used to basically impersonate an officer. In fact, last year, this administration, the Trump administration's FBI released a bulletin entitled, and I'm going to put this in the record without objection, Mr. Chairman, "Criminal Actors Impersonate ICE Agents to Commit violent crime. Are you aware of this bulletin put out by the FBI?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, sir.
So I'll put this in the record if I may, Mr. Chairman. So given this, the FBI is warning people that criminals are impersonating immigration officers. My question to you is, how can you expect any U.S. citizen to follow orders from an unidentified masked man surrounding them, given we know there are these impersonators out there that are, according to the FBI, committing a lot of crime because they're terrified. They don't know what's going on. They don't know who these people are, or they falsely believe they're a federal agent, and they aren't. They're a violent criminal. So, I mean, these tactics are causing fear. They're chaos in our communities. It's why we need, I think, to have common sense reforms to rein in these practices. What we're advocating is that the men and women who are federal agents just follow the same rules that our local police follow. Our local police are highly professional. I have the greatest respect for them. They do amazing work and put their life in harm's way regularly, but they have a set of rules that they have to follow. And that's not happening with what we're seeing with both, or with agencies related to the federal government. So I think we should have a legitimate discussion about that safety and reasonable practices going forward. And I would hope that you would support that. Just in general, do you think that you should follow the same rules of those followed by local police in our communities? Is that reasonable, Mr. Scott?
I believe you're talking about uniform standards. At CBP, we do. You have to have a name tag. It has to be clearly identified. There are times we've made exceptions on the name tag, and we used a different identifier, but it was an individual identifier so people knew who they were. And all of our agents and officers have to carry their credentials with them and their real badge with them.
So all across the board, there are a wide range. We put together a proposal of a wide range of practices that have been adopted by police organizations all across the United States of America. Would you feel comfortable abiding by the same kind of regulations and guidelines that local police follow on a whole host of issues?
I would look at those. I believe that very different law enforcement organizations have different considerations, but the general concepts, yes, and I think we do currently follow.
Mr. Lyons?
Yes, sir, I'm open to that, but one thing I'm also open to too, sir, is looking for the help from this committee and other elected officials, not only to help us bring down the rhetoric, but help us to hold those people accountable that are threatening ICE officers and agents. I think to dispel the fear of the men and women of ICE, that'd be huge. That would be a real step going.
As we've looked at the complaints, and Senator Peters has brought this up, one of the things from a lot of the different videos that are out there is the complaint that the officers are quick on the draw. Basically, they're drawing weapons. I know there are rules for the police drawing weapons. A lot of times I've been told you don't draw it unless you're planning on using it or unless there really is an imminent threat. There's some subjective nature to figuring that out. But, there was one video of a woman, you don't have to come out on the specifics, but, a hypothetical woman has come to a stop. She has not brandished a weapon. Her car is stopped. The ICE agents get out, all guns drawn. That to me doesn't seem like it would be consistent with your policy. What is the policy on when you draw your weapon? Each of you, Mr. Scott first.
Within CBP, when the officer feels there's a threat, but in this specific, like the scenario you outlined, and not that specific, but with the vehicle can and is often used as a weapon. When we train to do felony stops, basically the officers, when they stop that vehicle, they're trained to have their weapons out and ready because they're stopping a felony. So it's not that simple that you have to wait until you see a weapon. Sometimes it's literally that officer presence to keep the situation under control. But the weapon's only supposed to be pulled when the agents believe that it is required to affect that law enforcement action.
In this instance, I don't think it was a person that was targeted. I think it was a person they might have had some suspicion of. It wasn't a person that was targeted. The problem is that nobody really looks at this, particularly this one instance, and thinks the police would do it that way. When police make traffic stops, they avoid the car, they come from behind the car, they'll often have their hand on their weapon, but you almost never see a policeman with a gun drawn on a traffic stop or any kind of stop unless they've either seen a weapon or they really are in fear of their life. I think, and this is just my opinion, you have to look at what your rules are for drawing weapons, because it appears to me they're not using the same standard as the police.
Sir, I could just speak to my experience. I've done thousands of traffic stops. Like I said, I was a 10-year city police officer prior to coming to ICE. And obviously, our training, we do fall back on the two main Supreme Court decisions, Tennessee versus Gardner, for one. And, we can't speak to the totality of the circumstances, especially in the case where we don't know exactly what it is. We can't go to that officer's mindset. So each one is separate. But if you look at the use of force, curriculum in the pyramid, officer presence is include one of those things. So to your point, sir, I've done it many times myself, felony traffic stop. In the case of ICE, oftentimes we do know it's a felon or a wanted felon that we're going after. The firearm may be drawn. But again, each case is.
I think it does make a difference whether you're stopping a target who's a felon stop versus stopping a random person. In the instance that was displayed recently in the news, I don't believe it was a felony stop. I don't even believe it was a targeted stop. And
No, sir, that's what I meant to your point.
This, I think, probably was somebody filming that was annoying them or pestering them, and then they went and they followed the person and stopped them. And I think the weapons being drawn was inappropriate, but I would suggest that you need to look at these and you need to look at the policy, because I don't think they're living up to the same standard of the police. I think the police, frankly, are better trained, which is the other complaint that people have had. Have we rushed some of the people into the job, and have we not had adequate training? Senator Langford.
Chairman, thank you. And if you'd pass on a thank you to the men and women that literally put their lives on the line for the sake of the country every single day, I'd appreciate it. Because we hear story after story of death threats on ICE agents, on CBP folks that are being randomly attacked, of vehicles being rammed into their vehicles, of rocks being thrown at them, of threats that they have against their life and against their children. We hear it frequently, and it's not just random. The ICE facility in Dallas, where somebody just got up on a rooftop and started just open firing into a facility, killing two people not legally present in the country, but certainly we're targeting just a random ICE agent in the process. The very real threats that they face every day has got to wear on them. So if you'd pass on our gratitude to the folks that are putting their lives on the line every day and facing those kind of threats for the nation, a lot of folks are not willing to be able to do that. So please say thanks to them.
Yes, sir.
I would also say thank you as well. 2 years ago, we had 10,000 people a day illegally crossing into the country 2 years ago. 10,000 people a day, not vetted, we had no idea who they were. 70,000 people were estimated by the Biden administration to come in 2024 that were special interest aliens that had a locational connection to terrorism, but we had no idea who they were. They were allowed to be able to come into the country 2 years ago. The work that the men and women that work around you have done have stopped that chaos. Now we're discussing serious and tragic incidents, but I think we're losing perspective of really what's happened. And the amazing thing to me is, in the next 48 hours, we're arguing whether we're going to cut off funding and defund ICE and defund CBP and defund USCIS. And also, my Democratic colleagues are demanding to defund all of DHS, including Coast Guard, Secret Service, FEMA, CISA that handles our cybersecurity. All of them just be defunded because they're angry about this incident that is under investigation with multiple entities to be able to go through the investigation. So the frustration that I have is, I understand these are hard issues that we should spend time talking about because they're tragic and awful, but also thankfully rare. There are thousands of arrests that are happening in a day that are happening by the book. And what's happening is a group of protesters that are protesting and agitating, and some of them running into churches and disturbing church services and saying it's my First Amendment right to shut down your church during a service, and saying they're a peaceful protester while they throw rocks at agents. It just gets old, I'm sure, for a lot of those agents that are trying to do their job, because the few incidents, and they are few, thankfully, get highlighted, and the thousands of arrests and the 70% of the arrests that have been picked up that are criminal aliens that are being removed from our country, very few people are stopping to be able to say thanks to. So I just want to make it clear what's actually happening. So I do want to drill down on a couple of things. This issue came up about final order of removal. What percentage of folks that actually have a detainer put on them nationwide or that are in removal processes have a final order of removal? Does anyone know that number, that percentage?
No, sir, not the percentage. I can give you what we're tracking right now is about 1.6 million final orders in the United States, with approximately 800,000 of those having criminal convictions.
Correct. Of those folks, there's this debate against the final order removal and whether they should be honored in detainers in states like Minnesota, or what that actually looks like. As my colleague, Senator Johnson, was saying, the Attorney General kept saying, well, if they're convicted, then I'm going to honor it, but then came back later and said if there's a final order of removal. It's my understanding that the vast majority of these folks that are being removed have a final order of removal on them already through a court.
Yes, sir. Through an immigration judge with the Department of Justice, separate from Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
So I do want to talk about the Minnesota whole tragic incident and where we are on things. There have been operations in Memphis and in New Orleans and in North Carolina and multiple other places where there weren't incidents like this. Was there a difference in how command and control was actually done in Minnesota that was different in other location, or how was command and control actually handled in Minnesota?
Sir, command and control started with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Obviously, we've always been in the state of Minnesota, like all 50 states and territories. We always have offices. We were there, which we like to really point out the fact that we were there for the fraud case originally. The immigration piece did come into. Right now, there's 16,840 final orders at large in the state of Minnesota, which the officers and agents were there for. The one problem I have to point out different than, and it was brought up earlier, is the fact that, ICE agents, special agents, deportations officer, due respect, First Amendment right of anybody. Myself, I've had people protest, yell. That's just part of the business. The issue we were dealing with there is when we had organized groups, and I just was looking at, again, one of the flyers that was put out, when it said how to impede ICE operations and arrest. And it told white people to put their body between the criminal alien and the officer. Speaking from experience, prior law enforcement officer, if I was on the side, say at I-4 traffic stop when I was in Florida, and someone came up to me while I was arresting someone for being a habitual traffic offender, which is a civil violation, and someone gets between me, I'm going to arrest them.
Right.
People were actively told to go out there and impede, impede, to help the people we were arresting escape and ram vehicles. That's the complete difference which led to the escalation.
Okay. When we, I do want to talk a little bit about other things that are going on here, if I can have just a moment on this. Mr. Scott, tell me a little bit about, we've allocated $170 billion, which is a big dollar amount. Part of that's going to border wall, into what we deem to be better security long-term at our southern border and at our northern border. We can talk about that at a different time. What is happening right now with construction on the southern border? Those dollars have been allocated. We don't have a report yet what's actually going on.
Thank you. Yeah, we're building the new smart border wall at a record pace. There's about 35.9 miles of actual barrier that we've installed just since January. That's a combination of waterborne and the actual border wall, but there's 30 miles of new actual border wall. About 2 miles a week are currently being built. That will be ramped up dramatically as many of these contracts come on board. But I do want to take a minute to highlight, no matter what we do on the southwest border, we've learned if there's not a consequence once you get past us, the flow will never stop. So a big reason the flow slowed down is because we're actually arresting illegal aliens inside the United States and sending a message globally that we're not going to tolerate this anymore. That's why CBP that supports the interior operations to the maximum extent we possibly can. This all works together. We're also rolling out technology. It's not just the border wall. It's a smart system, new aircraft coming on. And as you know, we're hiring more agents and officers and making sure that they're trained to the highest professional standards available.
Great. Thank you.
Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to our witnesses. Just a brief note, even if the current funding bill stalls or is not passed that would fund the Department of Homeland Security, the department has an extraordinary amount of money at its disposal right now because it was funded during the big tax bill that my Republican colleagues passed last summer. So I just want the American people to be clear about that. Mr. Lyons, DHS officers have killed 2 American citizens in Minnesota this year. What were their names?
Whose names, ma'am? Sorry.
The 2 American citizens who were killed by ICE DHS officers in Minnesota. What were their names?
Renee Good and Alex Reddy.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say their names out loud, because so far this morning, as well as in 3 hours of testimony on Tuesday before a House committee, You failed to say their names a single time. Why?
Ma'am, I didn't neglect their names. I was answering the question. And ma'am, to your point, I did give my condolences to the family and requested to meet them personally to give my condolences on behalf of the officers and agents involved.
Well, Renee Good and Alex Preddy were human beings, and they're dead. Before they died, they had families and friends who loved them and were loved by. And it seems to me that too many at ICE have lost sight of the fact that they are interacting with real people, not nameless, faceless numbers or political targets. When we dehumanize our fellow human beings, that's when these kinds of tragedies happen. Now, Mr. Lyons, were Renee Good and Alex Preddy domestic terrorists?
Ma'am, while that investigation's ongoing, to my knowledge, no.
So to your knowledge, no.
With the information, I can't speak to it because it's an ongoing investigation, and we will make everything transparent, which I've already committed to at the last hearing. But
So in your testimony on Tuesday, you said that you don't want to comment on these ongoing investigations because you don't want to, quote, impede or, quote, bias the investigation. Is that what you said? Is that right?
yes, ma'am.
So Secretary Noem and Stephen Miller have called Renee Good and Alex Preddy domestic terrorists. So did Secretary Noem and Stephen Miller's comments impede or bias the investigations?
Ma'am, I don't want to comment on what comments they made. That's their comments. But again, I don't want to put my finger on the scales of the investigation and be too
Well,
presidential.
I understand you don't speak for them, and I'm not asking you to. I'm asking whether having the Secretary of Homeland Security and the President's Homeland Security Advisor call the subjects of an ongoing investigation domestic terrorists, whether their doing that impedes or biases those investigations.
Ma'am, again, thank you for saying that I don't represent them. I just think I can't speak
But you
to
don't
that
speak for them.
because I don't know what information was presented to them at that time. So again, I don't want to.
Look, your testimony doesn't make any sense. If it would impede or bias the investigations for you to say, right now, when you know a lot more than we did right after the shootings, whether Renee Good or Alex Preddy were domestic terrorists, if you saying that today would impede or bias the investigations, then why wouldn't it impede or bias the investigations for Secretary Noem and Stephen Miller to say the same thing about the same people?
Any comments that are made publicly, privately, text, email, or Instagram post, whatever, is gonna put a bias on the information.
Okay. So that is important. So I take it that you are saying that Secretary Noem and Stephen Miller were wrong to say what they said.
No, ma'am. Again, I can't speak to them, but what I'll just say to is, again, career law enforcement officer, myself and Mr. Scott, we won't speak to those type of things because we don't want to put our
Are you not kind of just being straightforward here and saying what's obvious because you're worried that if you do, you'll be fired?
No, ma'am.
The fact that you're unwilling to admit that Secretary Noem and Stephen Miller were wrong to say what they did, that they impeded and biased the investigation, is indicative of the complete failure of leadership at DHS and at all levels of this administration. Now, I want to move on to one other issue. Are you aware that ICE has identified a commercial warehouse in Merrimack, New Hampshire as a site for a new detention center?
Yes, ma'am.
So the town of Merrimack wasn't consulted about this plan, but when they eventually heard about it, town leaders wrote to Secretary Noem voicing their concerns and oppositions to the plan. And I have shared those concerns with DHS. Now, my colleague, Senator Wicker from Mississippi, expressed similar concerns about a proposed ICE facility in his state. ICE has now canceled that Mississippi project. So will ICE similarly cancel the New Hampshire project based on these concerns and local opposition?
No, ma'am. Actually, DHS has worked with Governor Ayotte, has spoke to the governor about economic impact. We did provide an economic impact summary.
And when exactly did you speak with Governor Ayotte? Because until recently, she said she didn't know anything about it.
DHS officials, ma'am, spoke with in the past weeks, but I can take that as a get back and get that exact time for you.
Let me be very clear. The people of Merrimack, their leadership, do not want this ICE facility in their community. And I think I can safely say that I have yet to find a Granite State community that does. Their worries go from the concerns about the way ICE is operating detention facilities to the fact that they will lose significant property tax value to their community. They have not been consulted. We have a long tradition of local control and participation in New Hampshire, and we expect that you will be sitting not just with the governor, but with local officials so that they can understand what the impact will be on their community. There are also significant concerns about the way ICE is operating some detention centers, the fact that measles outbreaks are happening in some of them. So I would hope that I would get the same treatment that Senator Wicker got, which is to say the town doesn't want the detention center, so please cancel it. And I would expect that my partisan affiliation shouldn't make any difference to that determination. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's important for that exchange just to acknowledge what Mr. Lyons, I do believe, said, and he said that he had no knowledge that either of the ones that were killed were domestic terrorists. That is correct.
To my knowledge, no, sir.
Okay. Say again?
To my knowledge, no, sir.
Yes, all right. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think we can all acknowledge any loss of life is a tragedy. So for Renee Good and Alex Pretty, your heart goes out to their families, and you wish it didn't happen. So from Florida, what we do is we always do an investigation afterwards if there's an officer-involved shooting, and I just want to thank you all for doing the investigation, and I hope it's thorough and we get all the facts, and people stop saying they know all the answer before the investigation's done. So I've been on this committee for 7 years, and so I came on during Trump's first term, and all I heard from my Democrat colleagues was all they did was attack CBP. I've never heard them do anything other than when somebody come and testify, scream at them about what a crappy job they were doing. I think what CBP does and ICE does, I can't imagine how difficult it is. What frustrates me is during the Biden administration, I don't remember my Democrat colleagues once questioning them about why they're allowing in all these terrorists, criminals, drug traffickers, ever. So we don't want to, no one wanted Renee Good to die or Alex Pretty, but what about Laken Riley or Jocelyn Ngari or Rachel Moran, any of these individuals? What about all the rapes that we've heard about all around this country? So what frustrates me is that what you all are doing is unbelievably difficult. And you're trying to clean up the crap that the Biden administration gave you. When we have no earthly idea how many criminals are in this country. We have no idea. But we know there's a lot. We don't know how many gang members are in this country. And think of how many people, our friends and neighbors have died of drugs that have come across our southern border. But it's never been a concern for the Democrats on this committee. In 7 years, I've never heard them complain about that. All they do is complain about how you guys do your job. So I don't get it. I don't get it how, I was a governor, I thought there's basically three things I expected to do. Help people get a job, help their kids go to education, keep them safe. And the most important was keep people safe. That's what you guys are doing every day. How can a mayor or a governor not want to cooperate to keep people safe? So what's it like when somebody's in a jail, like when you were in Florida, did our sheriff's offices and police officers, did they, if somebody was being released that was an illegal alien and had a criminal background, did they say, no, we're not going to talk to ICE? Was that your experience?
No, sir.
So have we had all these protests in Florida?
No, sir.
Have you had problems with ICE-involved shootings in Florida?
No, sir.
Why?
I think, sir, it's just the cooperation factor. That's a huge portion of it. And if I could, sir, when it comes to the detainer, ICE respects state law as well. Minnesota has it where they can't hold individuals based on the detainer. Massachusetts has a Lund decision where they can't hold individuals.
Why would they have that? How does that help? How does that help anybody that lives in that community?
Sir, it doesn't help public safety, but what I would ask is that even with the detainer, if you don't want to hold that person and it violates your state law, at least give us the chance to make that phone call. And I can give you an example from my time in Massachusetts. There was always the fact that we kind of felt like Charlie Brown with the football. They would say they were going to cooperate, but they would call knowing that there was only 12 ICE officers available to respond from Boston, Massachusetts to Cape Cod. And they told us we had 15 minutes to get there. But at the end of the day, when that individual was released, they still said, we called ICE. And unfortunately, there was way too many cases where we had an individual on Cape Cod in Barnstable County that was arrested for rape, was released on the detainer, and then went and raped again. So those are the cases that ICE is really concerned about. And if you don't want to hold an individual in custody longer than state time, by all means, ICE respects that. But please pick up the phone, give us the opportunity to come there and make that arrest.
So when they don't do it, is the community safer?
No, sir, it's not. And that prime example is one right there that they could have made the public safer.
So why do we have these? What's the rationale for these sanctuary cities? Can you guys tell me any reason you would have a sanctuary city where people say, I want the criminals to come to my city and I'm not gonna work with ICE to get them out of my community?
You know, unfortunately, sir, what we've seen so many times is, and again, coming from the civilian law enforcement side, when we hear about community policing, you always heard about the chilling effect of working with ICE. The problem is that backfires in these sanctuary jurisdictions because so many times we saw the criminal illegal aliens go back and offend and take advantage of the migrants that did come here for a good life. But yet they were told, if you cooperate with ICE, if you call 911, you're going to be deported, which is the farthest from the fact. If you look at what we've done with the help of CIS, with protecting victims of human smuggling, sex trafficking, with the U visas, T visas, things like that, that the goal of Sanctuary City backfires when it comes to protecting other migrants who are afraid to come forward.
How many times have you been asked about Lincoln Riley? You ever been asked about Lincoln Riley by a Democrat? How about Jocelyn Nunguri?
No,
How
sir.
about Rachel Marin?
No, sir.
How about any little girls that were raped? Ever?
No, sir.
No. You get asked about why you're not doing your job better.
Yes, sir.
I mean, if you listen to what's going on here, okay, the Democrats are mad because you're trying to protect the neighborhood, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. One thing I don't get is if you want to be a sanctuary city, why do you get any federal money? Especially any federal money to cooperate with law enforcement.
Well, sir, and that's one of the hard part for us. And again, the witness that was here earlier, both of us are career law enforcement. I respect his views and his career. But when it comes to issues like cooperation at the local state level, again, ICE does do that. But so many times, and I'll give you the example of Aurora, Colorado, we were going to serve a criminal warrant on an apartment complex of known TDA gang members that was full. We tried to work with the state and local government. They made notifications that the operations were ongoing. So when tactical teams arrived, protesters were already there and the apartment complex was empty. We've seen that time and time again. I've had it where I've made notifications. Again, I've had the privilege of having this job for almost 20 years and doing it at the enforcement level, to notify a local police department, and then they would put that out in a tweet. ICE is going to be at L and 8th Street. So we reach a point that we want to cooperate. We want to be good partners. But how many times, again, can we beat Charlie Brown with the football and say, okay, this time you're going to work with us? And it doesn't happen. And if you don't want to work with us, and I respect the agencies that say they don't want to, that is great. But there's been time and time again empirical evidence that we are impeded, our operations get leaked, and then we're put at home.
Thank you for what you do.
Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Scott, I wanted to start with you. Do you agree with Mr. Lyons' thoughts that he shared with us just a moment ago that
special interest aliens coming from areas of known terrorism, but we didn't know who they were, 70,000 just in 2024. So you are correct. I was willing to work with anyone to try to make that stop because it was absolutely out of control. I look at what's happening in Minnesota, and it's been a great conversation to try to just figure out things. ICE did a surge in New Orleans. This didn't happen. ICE did a surge in North Carolina. This didn't happen. When I look at my state and other states in the cooperation, there are right now about 1,200 jurisdictions in the country that have a 287G agreement with the federal government on honoring detainers and working to be able to partner together. There's 1,400 total agreements of some kind of memorandum of understanding with ICE and with local law enforcement across the country. But what I'm hearing from you is in Minnesota, a 287G would not be allowed according to state law. What's the cooperation? How many 287 agreements are there in Minnesota at this point?
Yeah, so the position that my office has taken is that if you are a sheriff who wants to pursue 287G, you must have the support of your county board under the Joint Powers Agreement. It's just a restatement of what the law is.
So how many agreements are like that?
I think 7 is the last number I heard, but there's no barrier. We're not saying that people can't do 287G agreements. We're saying that there is a procedure that they have to follow that involves engaging with their county board. That's all.
So I guess my challenge is, if there's someone arrested in Minnesota, let's say they've got 3 DUIs and they're arrested and they're incarcerated, and it comes up and pings in the records that this person also has a murder warrant in Oklahoma, would they be held until Oklahoma authorities came to get them at that point, or would they, at the end of whatever the term, be released? If Oklahoma reached out and said, hey, we want that person, I know you're prosecuting them, but before you release them, we want them, don't let go of them until we get there, what would happen in that situation?
I'm confident that Minnesota would honor Oklahoma's request.
Okay, how is that different in other places with ICE detainers? So if ICE reaches out and says, hey, this person's not legally present in the country, a court has already ruled they have a final order of removal, they need to be removed, would they be held until ICE gets there?
If there is a final order of removal,
Right.
then Mr. Schneller would be the best person to answer the question, but the answer is, yeah, ICE will be notified, those people are going to be picked up, those people are being picked up. And Senator, again, I did appreciate the work that you were doing on immigration, and I want to be clear that I think we need to return to that level of bipartisan cooperation, and I hope that you can continue in that direction. But one of my problems is that a lot of the reasons that the federal administration's giving for targeting Minnesota aren't justified based on the law.
Right, but
So-
I guess my first question is, if someone has a final order of removal from an immigration court, should they be removed?
Yes.
Okay, so then the argument from ICE is that sometimes they do a detainer, and by the time they got there, they've been released already. They're not actually there. Is that occurring?
Well,
Because I would say if Oklahoma contacts Minnesota and says, hold them till we get there, or if ICE contacts them and says, hold them till we get there, what's the difference?
If if somebody's been convicted of a felony, that person is going to be, there will be questioning as to what their nationality is. That information will be reported to ICE. Now, under a case which is based on federal and state law in Minnesota called Esparza versus Nobles County, if the person's not convicted of anything and there's an ICE detainer that's there, then ICE has to get them because they cannot be held beyond the time that the state have legitimate reason
But the
to
question
hold
is,
them.
are they notified in enough time for ICE to be able to get there? Because ICE's statement is, hey, we're going to get there as quick as we can, but it takes 2 agents to come pick somebody